Hello guys, I'm Super Ron. Welcome back to the channel. We're back in the G unit and we're back with the Zafira GSI. This week I've got some good news and some bad news.
Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my seat. Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my
So let's start with the good news. I've put quite a few hundred miles on the Zafira now and it has been amazing. It drives so nicely, it's dead straight, there's no bangs, crashes or rattles, and there is no smoke whatsoever out of the exhaust. Not on startup, not under boost, not running. It is absolutely smoke free, which is perfect. And it gains so much attention when it's out and about. Whenever I'm driving around, there's always people looking at it. When it's parked up, people often take double takes as they're walking past and notice it. The kids absolutely love driving around in it. It is the ultimate daddy cool. And so the bad news. You saw in a previous episode I had a little bit of a bottom end knock and we took the balancer shafts out and we found they were really worn and there's a lot of a movement in the bearings of them, so we removed them completely and started it up and it kind of seemed alright. I hope that was the cause of the knocking, but as it turns out, it's not. So yeah, that is some pretty bad news. A little bit of a backstory on the car, if you're only just tuning in. I bought this car a little while ago with a blown engine, investigated what was wrong with it, and it turned out it had been run lean and completely melted the inside of the engine. All the pistons were destroyed, the cylinder head was all destroyed, everything had just melted and smashed around into everything. So I sourced another donor car, a black Zafira GSI, and I took the engine out of that. It was high mileage and it did have a bit of a smoking problem, but it ran absolutely silently. It ran perfectly, it just plumed smoke out the back. So I set about using that engine as a base and then just did a full rebuild top to bottom. We had the cylinder head fully rebuilt with new valve stem seals, all the valve seats were regrinded, and it had a skim and a full clean up, so the top end is brand new. Because of the piston ring problems, I gave the bores a hone and a full set of piston rings, checked all the gaps, and we used the pistons out of the donor engine as well. Except for one out of the original engine, we just used all the best bits of what we had. I had two cranks, so again, I just chose the best one, and I used the balancer shafts from that engine as well, just because they were the cleaner ones. Got a brand new oil pump, new clutch, and put new mains bearings and new big end bearings in, so everything was super fresh. But when we started having this knocking problem, I really thought it was the balancer shafts, because when I took them out, the bearings were really worn in the balancer shafts, but alas, it's still there. So I know it's got good oil pressure because it is a brand new pump, and when you take the cap off on the top is flooded in oil, so we know oil's getting around everywhere, so it's not a dry bearing problem. There just must be something wrong with that crank that I missed. So I've tried a few little things. A little tip I got told to see if the bottom end has gone is to load up the engine, so put the handbrake on and just start to ride the clutch, and if the knocking goes away when it's under load, then it's quite likely a bottom end problem. I've rewatched the building of the engine just to double check I hadn't done anything silly, got something the wrong way round, got a rod cap the wrong way round, or forgot to torque one up. And I've watched the video, it's speeded up for you guys, so it's like a time lapse going through, but it's actually a recorded video. So I can watch the whole thing, check that I torqued every single one, check every rod cap stayed with that rod, and it is all perfect. I can't understand why it's knocking. So the bad news is, really, the engine's got to come out again. Just when you think you've covered all bases, the joys of being back in the Vauxhall world. In previous episodes you've seen I'm no stranger to taking these engines out now. I took the original one out of the blue one and the one out of the black one and then put the new one in this one. But that was in an all singing, all dancing luxury of Auto Shack where we had a ramp. So in that instance I just left everything on the subframe and dropped everything down out the bottom on a little trolley, built everything up so everything was connected, even all the radiators, the intercooler, all the pipe work, all the heater matrix, everything was all connected and it all went in as one. But in here, unfortunately, we don't have a ramp. So we might have to approach it a little bit differently. I have got a little trolley like we had at Auto Shack. From when I used to break cars, I used to lower them down on the subframes and just drop the whole lot out. And I made this tall enough that it goes under the engine crane so you can get everything out nicely. It's even used as a bit of a workbench. Kev, I don't know if you're still watching, but there's your bolt we had to weld on there many years ago. Bit of G unit archive. So I could use that and drop everything down just like we did at Auto Shack, But the problem is I'm going to be lifting the car up with an engine crane, so we're going to be arcing up like that. Instead of going straight up and down like on the ramp, we're going to be arcing, which will make it really difficult to get in. So we've got to start stripping it down. I've cleared all the kit car stuff away, so we've got a nice lot of space on here now to put all the bits. I've put the kit car down on its wheels, so we've got all the axle stands out from under there, and we've got a nice bit of room here. So I've just had a bit of a clear up, clearing all the spaces so we can take all this apart and get it back out again. Just got to decide the best way to do it. It's going to be easy getting it out. It's just going to be a bit more difficult getting it back in again. I remember when I first got this, I was just looking on eBay at other ones for sale. There's so many abandoned projects because they always have problems with them, with engine problems, and people just give up on them. And I saw one for a black Zafira GSI, and he said he had fitted 4 engines in it. He just kept getting second-hand engines that had a problem. He put another one in that had a problem, and he's just giving up on it. And I thought, oh, what an amateur. I'm going to do this properly, do it once, and not have to worry about it. Well, here we are. So let's start stripping it down, get it jacked up, get the bumpers off, get the wheels off, and approach how to get it out. So just before I drop all the fluids out, I think it'll be a good idea just to do a compression test, just for peace of mind, just so we know it is all okay in there and it is just going to be the bottom end, because once it's in bits, we won't really be able to tell. So I'll just do a quick compression test to clear that up. Number 1. 200. Number 2. 200. 3. 200. Number 4. 200. That's 200 PSI across all 4, which is exceptionally good. And I don't think it's a wet reading because the plugs aren't oily or anything like that. All the plugs look good and even. These were new plugs when we put it in. So I'm pretty happy. Compression, all the combustion chambers are perfect. So let's rip it out and have a look at this bottom end. So that's the rad out. Just give me a little bit more room for activities. It wasn't too bad to get out. You could slide it out and the water pipes aren't too bad to get to, so that's not too bad. Something I have had a problem with, since I put the car back together, I've had quite an oil leak on the front, and it's got even worse since I've done the balancer shaft. Covered in oil here, and it's actually coming from here. I'll put a new seal on, and then when I've done the balancer shaft, I'll put some seal around there as well. I don't know if I've got a cracked sensor, but we need to address that as well, because it is non-stop leaking. So let's get all the oils out and continue. Let's see if we can do this without making a mess. Woohoo. Success. Got a lot more stuff folded in, got all the wiring looms disconnected because they're all on quick release ones there. That's the power steering, heater matrix, fuel lines, gear linkage, all stays with the car. Folded all the looms in, everything this side's folded in, header tanks all disconnected, clutch lines off, locked up. So, how are we going to get this out? Could drop the subframe and then take it out, but I think I'm going to be able to get it out all as one, just like I always have. So I'll hang the calipers up on the shocks, let the hubs come down, and get the trolley out and drop it like it's hot. That's both hubs off, steering column disconnected, exhaust all off. So let's drag out this trolley. So now we are down all on the subframe. Axle stands are out, so the whole thing's sitting on the trolley. I had a bit of trouble with the angles because of how it's sitting, so I just had to put some little bits of wood under there. So now what I'm going to do is undo the subframe all the way around and then lift the car off it. I've got the strap around the chassis legs, I've just put this beam in just so there's no chance of them trying to suck in. I think we are all disconnected. I think. Doesn't seem like I've disconnected a lot, but that must be everything. So let's try and get this car off. Now we should be able to wheel it out the front. And it's out. And all out. That went perfectly. Nothing got caught up. Nothing got left behind. It's almost like I've done this before. So I just want to have a little look around because I haven't really checked on any of this since putting it in. Just want to see if there is any leaks or anything. But it all looks nice and dry at the back. No problems with the oil cooler lines by the looks of it. Which is always a big worry. Doesn't look like there's any leaks at all. Which is great news. So the only big leak we had is coming from this seal here. So I'm going to have to look. Something's got a crack in or it's a sensor itself. But luckily, got two of everything. Everywhere else is all bone dry, which is great news. So need to get this up on the engine stand, off the subframe, off the gearbox, and start opening it up. The only thing I did notice is when I took the shaft out and some gearbox oil came out, it's a bit of a milkshake. Must have been from when I pressure washed it all off. There must have still been just a little bit of water in there before I filled it up with oil. So I'm going to drain that out and put all fresh in. There's no whining or noises, so it must just be a little bit just to make a bit of milkshake. So we're up on the stand, ready for disassembly. You might have noticed I've left still everything on it. All the inlet, the turbo, all the loom, everything's still on there. And that's not just me being lazy, that is on purpose. I've got no need to take anything off the top end off. I don't need to take the cylinder head off, I can leave the pistons in. We can just flip it over and take the crank out. In theory, all we needed to get the crank out was the gearbox off, flywheel and clutch off, cam belt off, and we could have got to everything to drop the crank out in the car. But by the time we got the subframe off, the gearbox off, all the accessories off this end, there'll be nothing actually holding the engine in. And anyone that's ever lifted up a crank before will know how heavy they are. And to bench press that up and get all the shells and everything in would be near on impossible, even with a couple of people holding it and shuffling it in. So it'll be so much easier. We can have gravity on our side, flip the engine over, and we can make sure everything is fine in there. And that'll also save a big cost, because even though Vauxhall parts are cheap, there's no point buying them twice. We've got the inlet manifold gasket, all the turbo gaskets, head gaskets. There's no need to take any of this off. All we need to get to is the sump underneath. So let's flip this monster over. I reckon there's still going to be quite a bit of water in the block because the thermostat's closed. Yep. It's a heavy lump. Right. Makes things easier. Let's get this sump off. And we're in. Nothing visible so far. Nothing showing us loose. Caps all still seem fine. Well, let's take some caps off. So what I'm thinking at the moment is to get the crank out, we obviously have to take the oil pump off. To get the oil pump off, we have to take the cam belt off. So that means the engine is then not going to be timed up. I've got all the rods at halfway at the moment, but if we time it up at number one at top dead center, the rod is then right down in the bore, and it's really difficult to get the shells on. So I could take the rocker cover off, take the cams out, and then all the valves will be closed then, so there's no chance of them hitting the pistons. I can rotate the crank as many times as I want. But on the top end, there's no leaks. The cam seals are dry, the rocker cover's dry. So if I don't have to disturb that, I'd rather not. The other option is I've got the crank laying flat at the moment. So we've got a rod, and rod. And I can get to these bolts to undo them with a spanner to get the crank out. But then on reassembly, I'm not going to be able to torque them up in this position because I can't get the socket on them on the outer ones. But I can assemble it all, nip them all up, and then put the cam belt back on, and then when we do rotate them round, I can then torque them up properly then. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to nip them out in this position, and if this doesn't work and I have to rotate the crank, and I can just take the rocker cover off, drop the cams out, so all the valves are closed, and then we'll have no problems. But like I say, if I can avoid taking any more off, then I'd rather that, because it is all completely dry at the top end. So let's start by taking some caps off and just seeing if we can see anything obvious, because at the moment, there's no rocking, but the oil does create a nice little film in there. So let's take these off. That's all the big ends out, and early indications shows they've been knocked out for some reason. They're all scored and scratched, which must be from the crank. This one, number 1, is really bad. So that's where our knocking is. So we just got to find out why. They're all pretty much the same. Not good on a brand new engine. So next up, we need to get the mains out, and to do that we need the oil pump off. So we need to get the belt off. Now we're not at top dead centre, so we're not timed up at the moment. So what I've done is put my own timing marks on there and join them two together. So then I know I can put everything back together as it is now. So normally you get it top dead centre and you got one there, and one there. So if anyone ever goes to time this up and wonders what all these marks are in the future, check out this video. So let's get the belt off and get the caps off and see what the main bearings look like. Got the timing belt off, took all the pulleys off, started getting this cover off, but you can't get it past the pulleys. That won't come out. And I don't really want to take the pulleys off because then I've got to take the rocker cover off to hold the cams to do the pulleys back up. So for now, I'm going to leave this here. I can just about get to all the oil pump bolts, so I'll be able to do that. So let's carry on. And out we come. I wouldn't have liked to do that over my top of my head. So that's the block, all empty, just the rods and pistons chilling out in there. And here are the mains out. They don't look that bad. I did manage to get a look at these when we took the caps off, because remember when I'd done the balancer shaft delete, I had to block these oil ways, and they didn't look too bad. There's a little bit of scoring, but they're all even. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the mains themselves. And here is the crank. So when I chose it, this is the best crank out of the two, and still, it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with it really. That's a big end there. That's a main there. Here's a big end. There's no scoring, no marks. Nothing you can feel with your nail. But appearances must be deceiving. You can see on the inside there, it is quite scored actually. So maybe they've gone a bit oval. Just through wear, because from the outsides, they don't look bad at all. Which is why I chose this crank and thought, new shells, job done, happy days. But apparently not. So that's all stripped down and we've found the problem, but what do we do now? I've still got the other crankshaft, but like I said, that's a lot worse than this one. This one visually looks fine, and the other one you can actually see scores in it and feel them with your nail, which is why I chose this one. So I think the best thing to do is to send that crankshaft away to the machine shop and have them check it and machine it down, whether it's just going to be a polish or whether it needs a full grind, and get new shells matched to the crankshaft then, because then I know it's going to be perfectly circle, perfectly in line and perfectly balanced. I've got nothing fine enough to measure. I haven't got a micrometer down here to see if it is oval or whether it's just worn a bit. I'm not sure. But that is definitely the problem. That knocking was coming from the big end shells. The main shells all look okay, but obviously I'll be replacing the whole lot. And I think I have saved the rest of the engine. All I'm going to need is a bottom end gasket set. So I'm going to get onto Nevlock and order a bottom end gasket set, because that'll give us a new rear main oil seal. It'll give us the gasket for the oil pump, a front main seal, and also the gaskets for the 2 sumps. We haven't disturbed anything else. And then I'll probably get the machine shop to order the bearings as well, just so I know they're exactly matched to the crankshaft, and then we can put it all back together. So it's not exactly what I was planning to do with this car. I was hoping just to do it all once and enjoy it, but these things happen. A great video for you, not so great for me, but I've still enjoyed doing it. It's quite nice being able to drop it all down on the subframe and bringing it out in one instead of faffing around and getting all bits and pieces out. This reminds me very much of the old G-Unit days. So I have got to change the gearbox oil as well, because we saw that as a bit creamy in the top. And then I'll put all new fluids and filters throughout. So make sure you tune in to the next episode, because I'm going to send the crank away now, so that'll be back and we'll be reassembling this and getting it all back in the car. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you give this video a like, but until next time, make sure you have fun.